Welcome back. I keep getting this question, how can I really superpower my mind? It's by young men asking me this. They're going to university. They want to get through their studies. How can I really maximize the efficiency of my learning? How can I get through these exams? How can I supercharge my brain? How can I really maximize my concentration and become a super concentrated yogi? What does that mind look like? So I keep getting this. I've answered it a couple times. I'm going to answer it one more time. Hopefully this is the answer that will really hit home with you guys. And we're going to look to some great souls that have come before us and what they did. And it's going to give us some insight into brainwaves, both for concentration and also for inspiration. How do those two things work? How do we set up the correct kind of framework in our brain to enable those processes the most efficiently? So let's get into it. So first of all, we have to look at the beta brainwave. This is the conscious left mind brainwave. I'm using it right now to talk with you. I'm using the left hippocampus in order to communicate words with you. And so often we think that we need more of that. We need a supercharged form of that. And so we stress out the beta brainwave. We bring it in more. And we think that's going to give us the kind of concentration that we want, but it's not. It's actually giving us more and more of a stress state. And so the concentration is actually quite brittle. It's not flexible. It's quite brittle, and it breaks and it shatters. And when it shatters, we go more and more we spiral into more of a stress state. That's not the direction we need to go. We actually have to go down. And so the next brainwave under beta is the alpha brainwave. And this is where we start to get a little bit sleepy. And then below that is the theta brainwave. And that's where we really need to head in order to really supercharge our concentration. In one of his books, I don't know where it was, I remember reading it and I can't find it again. So if you do find it, you can always comment down below, let me know. But Yogananda said that he wanted to develop the ability to manifest things. And so he started to picture them very, very clearly in his mind. And to practice this, Yogananda would hold an apple in his hand and he would look at the apple, and then he would close his eyes and visualize the apple in his hand. Then he would open his eyes, look at the apple. Then he would close his eyes, visualize the apple perfectly. Can he see it perfectly? Then open his eyes, check the apple. Is it exactly the way that I saw it? Are there different details? Okay, now close my eyes and visualize the whole apple perfectly. And he said that many of his friends did not have the patience to develop this skill, but he did. And he found that by being able to visualize things perfectly, he would magnetically draw them much more powerfully into his life. So it's a great magnetic tool, but it's also a concentration tool. And it has to do with being able to dip into that theta brainwave. When you're in the beta, it's difficult to hold an image. And when you're in the alpha, you can begin to hold an image. But when you're in the theta, it gets easier and easier to hold that image and to modify it. And this is an essential skill for many inventors. It doesn't mean you have to be able to visualize something in order to be a great inventor, but it's very, very helpful, and you find it in people like Nikola Tesla. From childhood, he was building machines in his mind, and he would take the whole machine and turn it in his mind. He would take it apart, put it back together, take it apart again, take this part apart and blow it up in his mind and turn it and then try it a different way over and over and over again. he had this skill from childhood, or he developed it in his childhood. I remember one of the monks that I worked with was in maintenance, and he seemed like a very simple, humble person. But when you got to know him, you realized he had this incredible power to take things, objects, and turn them in his mind and figure out what was going wrong. That's why he worked so well in maintenance. He could take things apart in his mind and figure out what is the piece which is not working correctly. So that power of visualization, you never know where you're going to meet it. Some people have it very developed, and it helps them in their lives to take things apart and understand them. There's a story about Thomas Edison that to help him invent things, he was trying to get into this theta brainwave where he could visualize things. And so in order to get into that slower brainwave and not fall asleep, he would hold a ball. He would hold a ball in his hand, and he would rest his hand like this, where if he was to relax his hand too far, he would drop the ball. And then he would have a tin plate underneath the ball, so the plate would hit the metal, it would make a loud noise, and it would wake him up. So he had to stay in this in-between state where he's not fully in the beta, and yet he's not fully asleep, where he's lost all of the beta. And so you see how he's integrating brainwaves. He's bringing together, and he's dipping down, he's accessing that slower brainwave in order to have deeper visualization, and also to begin to reflect inspiration. So I talk a lot about alpha, theta, delta brainwaves, these slower range, because this is the beginning. We have to start to get into those, and it will make your mind feel a little bit fuzzy. So you're not going to feel as sharp right away. You're going to go through this transition where your brain feels a little bit fuzzy as you get into these states, these trance-like states. And people tell me, well, what about gamma? Because I heard that's where all the inspiration comes from. That's where the higher brainwaves are, this gamma, faster brainwaves. And that's absolutely true. But in order to reach those brainwaves, you have to begin to reflect them. And all of that reflecting, like still waters reflecting the moon, all of that takes place in the slower brainwaves. So we have to dip down into the slower brainwaves so that we can begin to reflect that gamma inspiration. And so that's what Edison was doing. That's what Nikola Tesla was doing. When he was building his machines and he was visualizing all of it, he would take it apart. And while he's in that slower brainwave, the inspiration would come through from the gamma brainwave. So if you want to really maximize your visualization so that you can more and more easily absorb the information, you have to dip down into some of these slower brainwaves. So it feels like you've got to be in the lecture and you've got to hold on to everything. But it's actually the opposite. You actually have to relax and just absorb it all into yourself and get dipping down into the slower brainwaves, into the theta state will allow you to absorb all of that information much more easily. So having this kind of exercise where you hold something and then you try and visualize it, and then you look at it, and then you try and visualize it over and over again can help you to slow down and visualize things more deeply in the theta brainwave. We can also begin to access all of this through Hakala. So we pick one point in front of us, we open up our peripheral vision, and it slows us down automatically. We just dilate our eyes by picking one point and becoming aware of everything in our periphery. And that allows us to slow down very, very fast. So if you're going into class or you're going to study, first slow down a little bit. Tell yourself, I'm going to open up my brain. And to do that, I'm going to use some Hakala. I'm going to look straight ahead and then open up my periphery. And that's going to slow me down and allow me to receive. So I'm not in a manic beta stress state. I'm in a receiving, swirling with the ocean of life. I'm swirling with it and I'm taking it all in this moment, and it will allow for easier recall. So you go into the test, you do the same thing. I slow down, I pick one point, and I open my periphery. And it really allows me to get into these slower brain waves where I'm going to actually recall things that I've learned from before. I'm going to put things together more easily because I'm relaxed. I'm not in a stress state. I am in a slower brainwave state, and I can actually begin to reflect inspiration. Now, some people will tell me that they cannot visualize, and I totally sympathize with that. There's nothing that I ever say that you absolutely have to do, except maybe get into heart rate variability. Everything can be tackled from a slightly different direction. So if one direction does not work for you, don't freak out, okay? So you can also feel a picture. You can also hear a picture. So those are two other modalities that are very common where people I don't feel like I can visualize things. Well, can you feel it? Can you feel it and really wrap your mind around it? Well, now you're creating a synesthesia. You're using visualization and feeling at the same time. And that's how my pictures actually work. They work with feeling and visualization at the same time. So I'm always feeling through the picture. I'm not just seeing the picture. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. Some people might actually hear through the picture. And so now they're using visual and auditory at the same time. And that will allow them to visualize where they didn't think that they could visualize. So somebody told me, well, I can't visualize at all. I have some medical condition and it says I can't visualize. I only see weird clumps. Well, then you see something, don't you? So you've just negated the diagnosis that you were given or that you gave yourself, that you can't see things, because you did see something, but it wasn't clear to me. Yeah, that's right. Very few people see things very, very clearly. They will always visualize things in kind of a blur or very quick or very, very sharp and fast because they're dipping into that theta brainwave and you don't stay there at first. You just dip in and you pop back out. So I only saw it this much and it was blurry. Well, you still saw it, didn't you? You still saw something. So you can't say you didn't see anything. You did see something. Now, there's some people that are very far removed from visual content in their minds. And so they'll say, I don't see anything at all. But the right hippocampus is still active, or you'd be a very different kind of person. So that means your brain is using images, even if you're not aware of it. And so try and use a different modality. Use your hearing, use your feeling, and try and feel into those pictures or feel into the object or feel into what you're trying to do. And don't get hung up on you have to visualize, because you absolutely don't, all right? You can just throw that right out. You do not have to visualize in order to be good at meditation or in order to be good at concentration or in order to go deep in meditation. You don't have to visualize at all. You can feel, you can hear, you can use your mind in many different ways, and so don't get hung up on one little modality like visualization. If you have visualization, fantastic. If you don't worry about it. Try and use feeling or auditory or even taste. That's another one. Or smell. That's another one. A lot of memories will come up to us through a certain smell. A certain taste will bring us back to when we were a child, right? So all of these have their place, and we don't need to get hung up on one of them. So I hope this was enough to push you over the edge and give you a plan of attack for your studies at school or for anything that you would like to pick up and absorb into yourself. Just come into class and go, I'm gonna open up my brain, and to do that, I'm gonna slow down just a little bit, and I'm gonna enter into the Hakala state, right? I'm gonna access a little bit of my right brain by looking at one point and then opening up my peripheral vision. And I just feel so quiet in that state, right? And now I'm really receiving. I'm not manically trying to get something. I am receiving. And it's a whole different framework, it's a whole different attitude, and it's going to turn your studies around. I guarantee it. When I did this with kids, I used to guarantee that it will bring them up by half a grade point. Guaranteed. So when you try this out, test it out for yourself and see if you don't go up half a grade point right away just by adopting this attitude of opening up your peripheral vision. And you just want to be aware of everything that's happening on the sides while you look straight ahead. You can look at your teacher like this, they won't even know. You're just aware of everything happening on the sides as you look straight ahead. So try that out. Try out some visualization and see if you can develop that, because that's the power to dip down into the theta brainwave, which is a slower brainwave where we can reflect inspiration. So I hope you loved this. If you did, be sure to hit that bell down below so I can see all of you next time.